Masashi Kishimoto. Yesterday, Weekly Shonen Jump released this interview that they did with Kishimoto in Jump Festa. So it's the end of the year, 2016, and now they're releasing it as an exclusive, I guess. And I read it, and it's funny because this interview that they did with him kind of reminded me of the interview that they did with him and Oda a couple of years back, I think. Yeah. And the thing I've noticed about Kishimoto, especially when reading his answers, is that you gotta understand, the guy is a fucking troll. And I mean that in the most loving, friendly, semi-respectful way possible. I really do, because, the work speaks for itself. And, but at the same time, there are some answers, and again, comparing these answers to like the back and forth that he had with Oda, where you can tell that Kishimoto, it's not even trolling, it's more like he uses the answers at times to throw subliminal shade. And so there is some amount of subliminal shade within some of these answers, and I'm not going to go through the entire interview. I'm just going to pick the questions and answers that kind of serve to illustrate and exemplify my point. So I'll start with this one. So the interviewer asks Kishimoto, as the original creator, how does it feel to read Boruto every month? Kishimoto responds, I'm separated from it, but I check over each chapter as it's being made, so I'm still part of the team. Because I'm still involved, I can't really look at it from a fan's point of view. And this is where the shade begins. Especially since the current story is still adapted from the movie script that I created. He's kind of like saying, these people are still stealing my shit. So on one hand, it does kind of seem like he's okay and actually glad to be part of a team. I'm guessing he has to give the okay for every chapter to get published. But on the other hand, he's like, guys, you are still milking the script that I created for the movie. Can we please come up with your own story, with your own new creative ideas, all right? So that I can enjoy this as a fan, okay? Or at least separate myself to a certain extent. Shit! Because otherwise, why would he make it a point to say that, right now, the manga, the Boruto monthly manga, is 100% based on something that I created, which is the script for the Boruto movie. You know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, let's move on. So another question is, what's the difference between Boruto and Naruto as characters? Kishimoto says Boruto is more sarcastic and Naruto is more straightforward. There's another good question here. So the interviewer asks, sometimes when a manga series introduces the children of the main characters, they end up being clones of the original. Was that something that concerned you? And Kishimoto answers, yes, it was. Part of it is that if the children or the characters aren't similar, if they aren't a little clone-like, it can be hard to express who they are. And I have some who are pretty much clones. He says Shikadai is a lot like his dad. And I agree with this, because out of the new gen, I think Shikadai and Inogen, I don't even think about these characters. And I don't know if that's because we just haven't seen that much from these characters, or if it's because they are, clones of their parents, and so they kind of blend into the background. But Kishimoto goes on to say, and some of the new characters are a combination of their parents, like Cho-Cho. And actually, I think Cho-Cho, out of the new gen, is one of the characters that stands out the most, in my opinion. But that's because we spent time with her in Gaiden. And also, we don't really know that much about Karui as a character. We really didn't learn a lot about Choji's wife in the manga. So, she does share Choji's eating tendencies. But I also think she's a lot funnier than Choji. And maybe that's the part, maybe the humor is what she gets from her mom. What can we look forward to in the upcoming Boruto anime? Kishimoto answers, as it went along, the Naruto story kept getting more introspective and darker and darker. So for Boruto, I want it to be a little bit more happy and fun, something that younger boys and girls can also enjoy. It's interesting because in the previous question that I read to you about the characters being clones of their parents, he ends the question by saying, Kishimoto says, with manga, sometimes you're going to get archetypal characters like that. So, the children will be archetypes to their parents, or they'll follow kind of like the same mold in a way. And then in this question that I just read to you, he's kind of like saying, oh, but I want to make it still more of a shonen. And I think when he says manga, I think he's incorrect. I think he means the shonen genre. With the shonen genre, sometimes you have to follow these molds, these archetypes, in order for it to fit the genre. So in a way, he's kind of saying that there is a restriction you know, in the shonen genre in terms of creating like innovative, like I guess more three-dimensional characters in a way, because it has to fit this pattern that has been, you know, kind of like consumed and produced for a specific audience for many, many years. So he understands that restriction, and yet at the same time he says, I want to keep doing that. I want to keep making these characters to fit this mold so that they can be enjoyed by young girls and boys. And then the interviewer kind of catches Kishimoto and puts him on the spot. He tries to check him a little bit because he says, wait a minute, you're saying you want to write this for a young audience, and if that's the case, and he doesn't ask the question like this, but I'm pretty sure this is what he was thinking. He asks him, well, not literally, but he says, then why the fuck did you open up the first chapter of Boruto with the possibility of Naruto being dead and Konoha being destroyed? Why is that a thing if you want this to be for a younger audience? And Kishimoto says, and this is him, like, I think he's finally admitting to the fact that the whole thing about Naruto being dead it was a total sham. It was a troll. He just did this to grab the reader's attention. Kishimoto answers, all right, that is true. I wanted to start the manga to be happy, but I also wanted to show that there's a dark turning point coming in order to grab the reader's attention. So in a way, I think what Kishimoto is saying, or what I think he understands, actually I know he understands this, and there's more evidence of the fact that he knows how to manipulate people later on, is that essentially he understands that sometimes in order to get people to buy and read your shit, you have to trick them sometimes. And, you know, part of being a writer is, in essence, learning how to play with people's expectations. Because if you were reading something and you already knew what was going to happen, if you could anticipate what was going to happen, you know, that'd be pretty boring. But those are called cliches, and people get bored of cliches. So I don't have a problem with him opening up the first Boruto chapter with the possibility of Naruto dying, because that gets people to read. The problem that I had is that you started it off with that, okay, and then automatically you kicked in the Boruto flashback of the Boruto movie. So it's kind of like you're giving people a reason to read, but you're also giving like people like how long have we been in this Boruto recap manga period? Like 4 months, 7 months? So you give something interesting for the people to look forward to, but then you also give them a reason to stop reading. It doesn't make a lot of sense. There's another question in which the question got me excited because the interviewer asks Kishimoto, how would you approach getting into or beginning to create a new manga series? And Kishimoto doesn't confirm that he's working on anything new. So that was kind of like the disappointing part, that he doesn't have any news or about like the fact that he's maybe working on something else. But he just said, you know, I'm just gonna, if I do start a new series, I'll just go in it with an open mind. And I'm just gonna, you know, just a blank slate. I'm not gonna compare it to Naruto because I didn't even know that Naruto was gonna get as popular as it did in the first place. So it's just better to just not worry about that stuff and just, you know, focus on the work. But again, there's no confirmation that he's doing any new work aside from the Boruto monthly manga. And then Kishimoto also brings up another concern, which is something that I've talked about in a lot of my previous Naruto Boruto related videos. And that's the fact that because he made Naruto and Sasuke so powerful, you know, because the battles became these bombastic, gigantic fucking fights, all right? And now that he has to work with the new gen, the new fights are going to be a lot smaller. And smaller in terms of fighting doesn't mean like worse, because you can have a small fight, but as long as it's entertaining and it has some strategy to it. I think that's the thing that, one of the things that made me fall in love with Naruto in the first place, is that the fights were very well thought out. But then, like, with Naruto and Sasuke, at the end of the series, at the end of Shippuden at least, it's kind of like, what the fuck? Like, you had these giant fucking monsters just punching each other and just throwing fucking nukes all over the place. So he says, yeah, the scale is a lot smaller. And so this is an issue that I brought up in the sense that in order to make the new generation shine, you do kind of have to end up working, or at least trying to find ways to nerf Naruto and Sasuke. And I think it's evident. We saw that in Gaiden. I think you even saw that in Boruto the movie, where he has to find a way of like immobilizing or at least hindering Naruto and Sasuke because they're so OP that if they get involved, they would resolve the conflict for the new generation. And obviously, if there's no conflict, there is no story. So this is like the penultimate actual question of the entire interview. The interviewer had to fit in a pairing war question. And this is it. And this is where the shade gets this is where Kishimoto throws some massive, we're talking Michelle Obama at Inauguration Day type shade, all right? Not even trying to hide it anymore. So the interviewer asks, was Naruto and Hinata getting married decided early on, or did you consider Naruto ending up with Sakura? To which Kishimoto responds, Sakura who? I mean, he doesn't say that specifically, but it's pretty fucking close. He basically says, you know, when I introduced Sakura, I only considered her as one of the bunch, as another character. I didn't do it to bring her in as a special female character. And I know this kind of seems like it's like a news headline or something, but to me it was just so obvious that Kishimoto just didn't care about Sakura. Like, I was beginning to change my mind when he actually gave her the fight with Sasori and Chiyo, but after that it's kind of like, yeah, Kishimoto, you did not care about this character. Come on, let's be honest. The way he was writing her, like the amount of mistakes and just all this stuff, all right? And then by the end, he tried to, like, you know, bring this shit together and, you know, give her the seal and, you know, tried to make her do something epic and say some type of epic things. But then it's like, it's the damage is done. The damage was done. I don't even know why people were defending. It was like so obvious. I don't have a problem with Sakura. I just think like the writing for her character was just trash, man. It was god-awful trash, man. And it's sad because she could have been a really good character. The potential was there, but Kishimoto, it seems like Kishimoto's just saying, I really didn't care about her from the start. So there's nothing there that was going to change my mind anyway. Kishimoto, if you had just come out with this, like back in the day when the pairing wars were at full throttle, I would have really appreciated this, but then that would have spoiled the surprise. So he continues on to say, she was at the same level as characters like Kiba or Shikamaru. Now, Shikamaru did get some development later on with you know, Hidan and Kakuzu and Asuma later on. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves here, Kishimoto, because Kiba and Shikamaru are not at the same level of character development. They're just not. And then he goes on to say, for Hinata, I decided pretty early on that they'd be together. All right, and this has been supported. It was supported throughout the series, and in fact, like one of Kishimoto's first designs is this one, and this is for Hinata. And look at the amount of detail that he puts into that drawing. Like Naruto is in the background. Hinata means sunny place. There's a sun in the background as well. These are not regular character sketches that you just throw out. So obviously, if he's putting in the work, if he's putting in the detail to this character, it's because the character will be important. But if I had cited that as evidence to support that Hinata will end up with Naruto, oh no, you're a fucking biased prick, NaruHina fucking tard, like you can't think straight, all that shit. Why? Because at the end of the day, the truth doesn't really matter when it comes to these things. It just matters what you want to believe. And if you want to believe something so strongly, you're going to look for evidence wherever it is or wherever you can reach to find it to support your own argument. So that's, I mean, it sucks for NaruSaku fans, it really does, but it's like, come on, like it was so fucking obvious. And then he says, you know, then I'd figured it'd be more interesting if Sakura would be in the middle, creating a messy love triangle. So, you know, at this point, he kind of views Sakura as like this needed or this necessary obstacle between Naruto and Hinata, you know, in order to entice people. And then he goes on to say, so I never thought about making them a couple, meaning NaruSaku, but I did throw in some clues to make the readers think that. So again, master manipulator of narrative in order to get you interested in it. That's basically what he's saying. And he puts, this is the nail on the fucking coffin right here. He says, it was all about Naruto and Hinata getting married from an early stage. I was never a NaruSaku fan, but it's like, if I were, reading this interview would be a stab to the heart. This would be disappointing as fuck. You know, just the fact that he's admitting, I never cared about this whole, like, couple in the first place. It was never going to happen. It was Naruto and Hinata from the start. And people would always say, well, it's because there's so much development between Naruto and Sakura. You know, Kishimoto is focusing on developing their friendship so that they can take that next step and become romantically involved. He never cared. Never cared one fucking bit. He just threw in that stuff so that you would just keep reading. And you know what? If that was his goal, mission accomplished. And finally, the last question of this interview, which in my opinion has the best answer of this entire thing, period, is the interviewer asks, so you came to New York Comic Con a few years ago and got to meet and see thousands of your fans. How did the experience affect you? Now, thankfully, Kishimoto does not mention our encounter in the bathroom. The last time I saw him, he was taking a piss, and, you know, I got kicked out of there. But he doesn't mention that, so I'm really thankful for that. And I don't really, you know, whatever he says in terms of the fans, that's all good and dandy, but there is one part that I just think really, really caught me off guard. And I know that Kishimoto has to be a very politically aware individual. You can't write a series like Naruto without having some knowledge of world politics. You know, go back to, like, for example, the Senju versus the Uchiha. The fact that Nagato grew up in a war zone, you know, and his parents got murdered and shit, and that's why he became, you know, the person that he became and just became this massive threat. Also, how Tobirama decided that it would be a good idea to segregate the Uchiha, and that ended up, like, fostering more hate from the Uchiha towards Konoha, and how that leads to, you know, eventually the Uchiha massacre and Itachi and all that stuff. So he's very politically aware, I have no doubt about that. And so Kishimoto's final statement for this interview reads as follows, and I love this because, you know, I wasn't going to say this, but like during the weekend, I didn't post anything. I didn't upload any videos, and it's because like I didn't feel motivated to talk about anime because it's like there are bigger things going on in the world than Goku and Luffy, and I wanted to talk about them, but it's like sometimes there's just bigger things that you need to talk about, but at the same time, I didn't know what I wanted to say, and I didn't know how what I was going to say would be helpful. So I just decided not to do anything, and I waited, and this interview came out, and it was like, wow. So Kishimoto says in the final part of the interview, where you're from doesn't make any difference. We all feel things in the same way. We might use different words and have different customs, but at the core, we're all the same. So I don't have to worry about how different audiences will react to my work. Those are pretty wise words. You know, because we're living in a very divisive time, and so I think it would do us some good. You don't have to, but I think it would be good to just keep them in mind. Just a suggestion, not a command or an obligation. But anyway, thank you for watching. Like the video if you did. Subscribe to my channel, and comment down below with your thoughts about anything that I said in the video. Thank you. Bye.